The ultrasound technician's face went pale as he counted again on the screen. "It's not one baby. It's 3, he whispered, while his mother's furious voice echoed from the hallway demanding he abandon that woman. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started." The test stick trembled in Maya Johnson's hands, 2 pink lines staring back at her like a sudden plot twist in her carefully planned life. She blinked twice, hoping the second line might disappear, not out of dread, but from the sheer unexpectedness of it all. The small bathroom of her dormitory felt even smaller now, the winter light filtering through the frosted window, casting everything in a pale, unforgiving glow. "Pregnant," she whispered to herself, the word hanging in the air between certainty and disbelief. Maya placed the test on the edge of the sink and caught her reflection in the mirror. At 22, her face still carried the softness of youth, but her eyes held the determination that had carried her from the working-class neighborhoods of Roxbury to the hallowed halls of Harvard. A full scholarship student in computer science, she had defied every statistic, every expectation. And now this. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jonathan. "Coming over tonight? Miss you?" Jonathan Whitmore. For 2 years, they had been the unlikeliest of couples on campus. The scholarship student from Roxbury and the heir to one of Boston's oldest real estate fortunes. She still remembered the day they met, how he had spotted her in the library, surrounded by programming books, completely absorbed in her work. "You look like you're solving the world's problems," he had said, his confident smile softening his otherwise aristocratic features. "Just trying to debug this stubborn piece of code," she had replied, not looking up immediately. When she finally did raise her eyes, she was struck by how blue his were. Whitmore blue, as she would later learn, a family trait passed down through generations of Boston elite. Maya shook the memory away and texted back, "Yes, need to talk to you about something important." That evening, she walked through the biting February cold toward Jonathan's luxury apartment near the river. Snowflakes caught in her dark curls as she rehearsed what she would say. They hadn't planned this, certainly, but they loved each other. They would adjust their plans, figure it out together. The doorman nodded in recognition as she entered the marble lobby. 2 years of dating Jonathan, and still some of the staff looked at her with barely concealed curiosity, the black girl from Roxbury who had somehow caught the young heir's attention. Jonathan opened the door before she could knock, pulling her into a warm embrace. At 25, he already carried himself with the assured confidence of someone who had never questioned his place in the world. Recently appointed as deputy CEO of Whitmore Properties, he moved through life with the ease of someone who expected doors to open before he reached them. "You look beautiful," he said, helping her out of her coat. "Though a bit serious. Everything okay?" Maya took a deep breath. "Can we sit down? I need to tell you something." They settled on his leather sofa, the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a view of the Charles River, frozen and glittering under the city lights. Maya twisted her fingers together, suddenly finding all her rehearsed speeches inadequate. "John, I'm pregnant." The words hung between them in the warm air of the apartment. Jonathan's expression froze, his blue eyes widening slightly before his face became unreadable. The silence stretched for seconds that felt like hours. "Pregnant?" he finally said, standing abruptly. "That wasn't in our plans, Maya." He walked to the window, his back to her, his reflection superimposed against the dark city beyond. Maya watched him, confusion growing as she noted the stiffness in his shoulders. "I know it wasn't planned," she said carefully, "but we can figure this out together. There is no we in this equation," Jonathan interrupted, turning back to face her. He walked to the bar cart in the corner and poured himself a generous measure of whiskey. "Do you have any idea what this means?" Maya felt the first chill of fear slide down her spine. "What do you mean?" Jonathan took a long sip before answering. "The Whitmore name means something in this city, Maya. My father just appointed me to the board. We're negotiating the largest acquisition in company history. I don't understand what that has to do with everything." His voice rose sharply. "It has to do with everything. My family has expectations. There's a way things are done." Maya stood up, her legs shaky. "John, we're talking about our baby." The transformation in his expression was gradual but complete, from shock to calculation to cold resolution. In 3 horrifying hours, Maya watched the man she loved morph into a stranger. A black woman from Roxbury raising the Whitmore heir? He laughed, the sound brittle and cruel. "My family would be ridiculed in every social circle in Boston." Maya felt as if she'd been slapped. "Is that all I am to you? A black woman from Roxbury?" Jonathan drained his glass and set it down hard on the marble side table. He walked to his desk, wrote something, and returned. With a smooth motion, he slid a check across the coffee table toward her. $10,000, he said flatly. "Solve the problem or disappear." Maya stared at the check, comprehension dawning slowly, horrifically. "You're asking me to get rid of our baby? You can't be serious." "I've never been more serious," Jonathan replied, his voice now businesslike. "This was fun, Maya, but let's be realistic. You were always a charity project for me." "A charity project?" Maya repeated, her voice barely audible. "We've been together for 2 years. And it's been interesting," he continued, refilling his glass. "You're smart, of course, predictable in your own way, but you lack the spark needed for my world, the pedigree, the Polish." Tears slid silently down Maya's cheeks. "How can you say these things after everything we've shared?" Jonathan's expression hardened further. "This is who I've always been, Maya. You just saw what you wanted to see." He pulled out his phone and dialed a number. "Security? I need someone to escort a person out." Maya stood, her body moving on autopilot, dignity somehow keeping her upright when all she wanted was to collapse. "You'll regret this, Jonathan." "I doubt that." He walked to the closet and removed a small box containing the few belongings she'd left at his place over time. "You'll never be enough for someone like me, Maya. Do us both a favor and disappear." While she struggled to process what was happening, Jonathan's phone rang. He answered it, turning away from her as if she were already gone. "Carlton Whitmore's office?" "Yes, I'll hold for my father." Security arrived 15 minutes later, a polite but firm man who escorted Maya to the lobby. As they walked, she realized with sickening clarity that Jonathan had already called down to change the security protocols. Her keycard no longer worked in the elevator. Outside, a fine rain had replaced the snow, soaking through her coat as she stood on the sidewalk, clutching the box of her possessions and the crumpled check. Pedestrians hurried past, oblivious to the fact that her entire world had just collapsed. Maya placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach. "It's just us now," she whispered to the life growing inside her. As she walked away from the luxury building where she had spent so many happy evenings, Maya couldn't possibly know that 15 years later she would be returning to Boston, not as the rejected girl, but as the billionaire who would make the Whitmore empire tremble. Maya stared at the luxury building receding behind her, the rain soaking through her thin coat and mingling with the tears on her face. The crumpled check for $10,000 felt like it was burning a hole in her pocket. Blood money meant to erase a life. Her life. Their child's life. "I won't let him win," she whispered, clutching her box of meager possessions closer to her chest. The following morning, Maya's phone buzzed with an email notification. Still wrapped in her dormitory blanket, she squinted at the screen, her puffy eyes struggling to focus on the words that would mark the beginning of her systematic destruction. "Ms. Johnson, we regret to inform you that your position in the Horizon Tech summer internship program has been canceled due to unforeseen circumstances." Maya sat up, fully awake now. The internship at Horizon Tech had been secured months ago, a prestigious position that practically guaranteed job placement after graduation. She had beaten out hundreds of applicants. Before she could process this blow, her phone rang. The caller ID displayed Harvard administration. "Ms. Johnson," began the crisp voice on the other end, "we'd like to schedule a meeting regarding your academic standing. There have been some concerns raised about your scholarship status." "My scholarship?" Maya's voice cracked. "I have a 3.9 GPA. What concerns could possibly—" "The dean would prefer to discuss this in person. Tomorrow at 9? Within 48 hours, Maya found herself sitting across from Dean Harrington, a man whose warm smile had welcomed her to Harvard 4 years ago. Today, that smile was nowhere to be seen. "Ms. Johnson, certain issues have been brought to our attention regarding conduct unbecoming of a Harvard scholarship recipient," he said, shuffling papers without meeting her eyes. "What issues?" "My grades are excellent. I've never had a disciplinary problem," Maya responded, fighting to keep her voice steady. The dean cleared his throat. "There are concerns about your associations and values alignment with the institution." As Maya left the office with her scholarship under review, a cold realization washed over her. Outside, she bumped into her roommate Lisa, who pulled her aside. "Maya, there are rumors flying around," Lisa whispered, glancing nervously over her shoulder. "Did you know the Whitmores have donated millions to Harvard over the years? The new computer science building literally has their name on it." That night, Maya returned to find her dorm room access card deactivated. A residential assistant stood awkwardly in the hallway with a box of her things. "I'm sorry, Maya. There was an administrative decision." The young woman trailed off, unable to meet Maya's eyes. With nowhere to go, Maya called the only friend she thought she could trust, Priya from her advanced algorithms class. Priya hesitantly offered her couch, just for a few days. Those few days stretched into a painful week of cramped discomfort, Priya's roommates making their displeasure increasingly obvious with pointed sighs and whispers when Maya was within earshot. "I think you should look for somewhere else," Priya finally said on the 8th day, her eyes fixed on the floor. "My roommates are complaining to the landlord about an unauthorized tenant." The women's shelter in Dorchester was a stark concrete building with narrow windows and flickering fluorescent lights. Maya's hands trembled as she filled out the intake form, the question, reason for seeking shelter, making her pause. "Financial hardship and pregnancy," she finally wrote, the words blurring through her tears. The shelter bed was thin and the room was shared with 3 other women, but it was safe. Maya spent her days frantically searching for work, discovering that her nearly completed Harvard degree was now more hindrance than help. "You're overqualified," said the manager at the coffee shop, eyeing her resume suspiciously. "And wouldn't you be returning to finish your degree soon?" After 15 rejections, Maya began omitting her Harvard education from applications. The next day, she was hired as a morning counter attendant at a busy bakery in South Boston. The pay was minimum wage, but it was something. 2 weeks later, she added an afternoon position as a data entry clerk at a small insurance company, and by the end of the month, she was washing dishes at a Chinese restaurant in Chinatown until midnight. Each night, Maya would stumble back to the shelter, her hands raw from hot water and harsh detergents, her back aching from hours of standing. Morning sickness made her first job torture, but she couldn't afford to lose any income. One particularly cold evening in late March, Maya sat on a bench in Boston Common after working a double shift at the restaurant. Her feet throbbed in her worn shoes, and her fingers were still pruned from hours of dishwater. She had exactly $22 left until payday, and her pregnancy was beginning to show enough that her bakery uniform was getting tight. A job interview for an office assistant position had gone well that afternoon until the manager received a phone call during their meeting. His demeanor had changed instantly, and Maya was ushered out with vague promises to be in touch. It was the 3rd time something similar had happened. The long reach of the Whitmores was becoming undeniable. Maya placed a gentle hand on her still small bump. "He thinks we're not enough," she whispered to her unborn child, the words forming clouds in the cold air. "But I'm going to build a world where he would be insignificant." The crumpled check had remained in her wallet, untouched. Maya had refused to cash it for the purpose Jonathan intended, but now, looking at the dark Boston skyline, she made a decision. The next morning, she walked into a small credit union and opened an account, depositing the $10,000. This wasn't blood money anymore, it was seed money for a future. A week later, Maya sat nervously outside the office of Dr. Eleanor Rivera, her former professor of social entrepreneurship. When the door opened, the older woman's face lit up in genuine surprise. "Maya Johnson, I've been wondering where you disappeared to. You stopped coming to class so suddenly." Once inside the comfortable office lined with books and global artifacts, Maya took a deep breath. "Professor Rivera, I need your help. I want to finish my degree remotely while I work. I want to build something that changes lives." Dr. Rivera listened intently as Maya outlined her academic situation, careful to omit the pregnancy and Jonathan's involvement. "And you need to do this away from Boston?" Dr. Rivera asked perceptively. Maya nodded, her eyes dropping to her hands. "The circumstances here have become impossible." The professor studied her former student carefully. "You don't need to tell me everything, Maya, but know that I'm here to help." Dr. Rivera made several phone calls over the next days, pulling strings that Maya hadn't known existed. "I have a former student at Stanford who can facilitate a transfer of your credits. And here," she handed Maya a small notebook, "I've written down contacts in Silicon Valley, people who value talent, not last names." On her last night in Boston, Maya sat in the shelter's common room, composing an email on her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keys before decisively typing, "To Jonathan, Whitmore at whitmoreproperties.com. Subject, Goodbye, Jonathan. One day I will return, not as the girl you discarded, but as the woman you never imagined I could become." Maya, the Greyhound bus pulled away from South Station at dawn, carrying Maya and her single suitcase across the country. As the Boston skyline receded in the morning light, she pressed her forehead against the cool window glass, watching the city that had given her so much and taken almost everything fade into the distance. The landscape changed outside her window over the next 3 days, the dense urban northeast giving way to vast Midwestern plains, then mountains, and finally, the promise of California. Throughout the journey, Maya devoured books on business strategy and programming, filling a notebook with ideas and code. When she finally arrived in Palo Alto, the warm air and palm trees felt like another world. Maya had found a tiny room to rent through one of Dr. Rivera's contacts, smaller than her former bathroom in Cambridge, shared with another single mother. The contrast between Silicon Valley's visible wealth and her own meager budget was stark, but Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in weeks: hope. That evening, she carefully deposited Jonathan's check into her new bank account. "This money isn't for forgetting," she whispered to herself. "It's for building." As she fell asleep on a mattress on the floor, one protective hand resting on her growing belly, Maya couldn't have predicted that the baby growing inside her would not only become her greatest motivation, but a prodigy who, at 15, would be accepted to MIT, the same age at which the world would discover who his father was. Maya found Dr. Eleanor Rivera standing at her office door, her face brightening with genuine surprise. "Maya Johnson, I was beginning to worry. When you stopped showing up for class without explanation." Maya managed a weak smile, the exhaustion of her 3 jobs evident in the dark circles beneath her eyes. "I'm sorry for disappearing, Dr. Rivera. There's been a lot happening." The professor ushered her into the warmth of her office, a sanctuary of knowledge with walls lined with books and shelves adorned with artifacts from her global humanitarian work. The familiar scent of Earl Grey tea and old paper brought Maya a momentary comfort she hadn't felt in weeks. "You look tired, dear," Dr. Rivera observed, gesturing to a worn leather chair. "More than just end-of-semester exhaustion." Maya sank into the chair, gathering her courage. "Dr. Rivera, I need your help. I want to finish my degree while working. I want to build something that changes lives." She paused, her hands unconsciously moving to her stomach before dropping back to her lap. "And I need to do this away from Boston." The professor's keen eyes missed nothing, but she asked no invasive questions. Instead, she leaned forward, hands clasped on her desk. "Tell me what you need, and let's see what we can do together." For the next hour, Maya outlined her academic situation, carefully omitting her pregnancy and Jonathan's betrayal. Dr. Rivera listened intently, occasionally making notes in a small leather-bound book. "The circumstances here have become impossible," Maya concluded, her eyes fixed on the framed diplomas behind her professor. Dr. Rivera studied her former student with the penetrating gaze that had made her famous among Harvard students, the look that seemed to see past carefully constructed facades. "You don't need to tell me everything, Maya, but know that I'm here to help." What followed was a masterclass in how networks of support could function. Dr. Rivera made calls to colleagues across the country, her voice carrying the authoritative warmth that had opened doors throughout her career. "Naomi? It's Eleanor. I have an exceptional student who needs to transfer credits to Stanford to complete her degree remotely. Computer science. Yes, truly brilliant. Can you help?" After the third call, she handed Maya a small notebook. "I've written down contacts in Silicon Valley, people who value talent, not last names. They can help you find work while you study." Maya's fingers trembled as she accepted the notebook. "I don't know how to thank you." "Thank me by building something remarkable," Dr. Rivera replied with a gentle smile. "Silicon Valley may be competitive, but it rewards innovation in ways Boston sometimes forgets." A week later, Maya stood in the shelter's common room, a single suitcase containing everything she owned packed beside her. The ancient desktop computer in the corner hummed as she typed her final message to Jonathan, the man who had believed she would simply disappear. To Jonathan, Whitmore at whitmoreproperties.com. Subject: Goodbye, Jonathan. One day I will return, not as the girl you discarded, but as the woman you never imagined I could become. Maya. Her finger hovered over the send button for just a moment before pressing down with definitive force. No lengthy explanation, no emotional plea, just a promise that would fuel her through the darkest moments to come. The Greyhound bus departed South Station at 5:30 the next morning, the gray Boston dawn reflecting Maya's somber mood. As the skyline diminished behind her, Maya pressed her forehead against the cool window, allowing herself one final look at the city that had given her both her greatest hopes and deepest wounds. "Goodbye for now," she whispered, her breath fogging the glass. The cross-country journey took 3 days, 3 days of cramped seats, gas station meals, and fitful sleep. Yet for Maya, it became a cocoon of transformation. While other passengers dozed or stared vacantly out windows, she devoured books on entrepreneurship, programming languages, and business strategy. Her notebook filled with ideas, flowcharts, and code snippets, each page a rejection of Jonathan's cruel assessment of her potential. When the bus finally rolled into the Palo Alto terminal, Maya stepped out into California sunshine that seemed to promise new beginnings. The palm trees and modern architecture stood in stark contrast to Boston's colonial rigidity. The room she had arranged through one of Dr. Rivera's contacts was tiny, smaller than the bathroom in Jonathan's luxury apartment. She would share the apartment with Lucia, another single mother who worked nights as a hospital orderly. The neighborhood was far from the gleaming tech campuses that made Silicon Valley famous, but the rent was what Maya could afford on paper. Reality, however, proved harsher than anticipated. Her first week of apartment hunting and job applications revealed the enormous gap between Maya's resources and Silicon Valley's cost of living. Even studio apartments in questionable neighborhoods required first and last month's rent plus security deposit, sums that would quickly deplete Jonathan's check if she wasn't careful. "You need to be strategic," Maya told herself, sitting cross-legged on the bare mattress that now served as her bed. This money isn't for comfort. It's for foundation building. After securing the small room with Lucia, Maya dedicated herself to finding work that would sustain them while allowing her to complete her degree online. The paradox of her situation became quickly apparent. Her nearly completed Harvard education made her overqualified for entry-level positions, while her pregnancy and lack of connections excluded her from the tech roles she was qualified for. Her breakthrough came through Mr. Chen, the uncle of one of Dr. Rivera's former students. His small software development company needed a junior programmer who could work flexible hours. The pay was modest by Silicon Valley standards, but the hours were adaptable, and, most importantly, Mr. Chen asked no questions about her growing belly. "You code well, you keep job," he said simply after reviewing her technical assessment. "Family business. We understand family comes first." That night, Maya finally deposited Jonathan's check into her new bank account. As she watched the teller stamp the deposit slip, a weight lifted from her shoulders. This wasn't blood money anymore. It was the first investment in her future. "This money isn't for forgetting," she whispered to herself as she left the bank. "It's for building." Back in her room, Maya created a document on her laptop titled 15-Year Plan. The first entries were pragmatic: complete degree, establish stable income, secure health insurance before delivery. But as she continued typing, the goals grew bolder: develop healthcare access app, secure seed funding, scale to underserved communities nationwide. The final entry, scheduled for year 15, simply read, "Return to Boston as CEO." As her pregnancy progressed, Maya developed a routine of disciplined productivity. Mornings were dedicated to her online Stanford courses, afternoons to her programming job at Chen Software Solutions, and evenings to developing her own healthcare access application concept. She tracked every dollar spent, cutting corners wherever possible, preparing meals in the apartment's tiny kitchenette, walking instead of taking buses, buying secondhand maternity clothes from thrift stores. Her 7th month brought unexpected complications. Preeclampsia forced her to reduce her hours at work, cutting her already tight budget. One evening, after a particularly discouraging doctor's appointment where she was advised to rest more, an impossible luxury, Maya sat on the edge of her mattress, tears of frustration threatening to overflow. "Your father thinks we're not enough," she told her active bump, feeling kicks against her palm. "But we're going to build something he couldn't even imagine." Nathan Johnson was born on a sweltering August day in a public hospital in Palo Alto. Maya was taking her final exam for advanced data structures online when her water broke, finishing the last question between contractions before calling a rideshare to the hospital. When the nurse placed the 7-pound, 6-ounce bundle in her arms 6 hours later, Maya studied her son's face with wonder. He had her warm brown skin and full lips, but his eyes, though newborn blue, already showed hints of the piercing Whitmore gaze. "Hello, Nathan," she whispered, tracing his perfect features with a gentle finger. "We're a team now." That night, as Maya dozed with Nathan sleeping against her chest in the hospital's shared recovery room, she couldn't know that the baby in her arms would not only become her greatest motivation, but a scientific prodigy who, at 15, would be accepted to MIT with a full scholarship, the same age at which the world would discover who his father was. The contractions had started during Maya's advanced algorithm's final exam. She gritted her teeth, breathed through the pain, and managed to complete the last essay question before carefully closing her laptop. Only then did she allow herself to acknowledge what was happening. "It's time, Nathan," she whispered, one hand on her swollen belly as she reached for her hospital bag with the other. The rideshare driver looked alarmed when she climbed into his back seat, her face contorted with another contraction. "Ma'am, are you having a baby?" he asked, wide-eyed in the rearview mirror. "Not in your car, I promise," Maya managed through clenched teeth. "Just please get me to Palo Alto General quickly." 6 hours later, as the California sun was setting, Maya held her son for the first time. Nathan Johnson entered the world with a powerful cry that seemed to announce his presence with authority. As the nurses placed him on her chest, Maya studied his features with wonder. He had her warm brown skin and the shape of her mouth, but even as a newborn, something in the set of his features hinted at Jonathan. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "We're a team now." The nurses eventually took Nathan for his initial exams, leaving Maya alone in the recovery room. The reality of her situation crashed over her like a wave. She was 23, alone in a city where she knew almost no one, with a newborn and barely enough savings to cover 3 months of expenses. When she was discharged 2 days later, the true challenge began. The first weeks passed in a blur of sleepless nights, constant feedings, and desperate attempts to keep up with her remaining coursework. Maya set up a makeshift office nursery in her tiny rented room, placing Nathan's second-hand bassinet next to her desk. "Just a few more weeks," she would whisper to him as she typed one-handed, the other arm cradling him against her chest. "Then Mommy will have her degree, and we'll start building our future." At 6 weeks postpartum, Maya had her first video conference with potential employers. She dressed professionally from the waist up, positioned the camera carefully to hide the laundry drying in the background, and prayed Nathan would sleep through the 30-minute call. 5 minutes in, his hungry cries filled the tiny room. Maya's heart sank as she watched the interviewer's expression change. "Is that a baby?" the woman asked, her brow furrowing. "Yes, I'm sorry," Maya admitted, reaching out of frame to bring Nathan to her. "My son is 6 weeks old." The interview ended shortly after with vague promises to be in touch. They never called back. This scene repeated itself in variations over the following months. Maya would apply for programming positions, impress in technical assessments, then watch opportunities evaporate when employers realized she was a single mother with an infant. Her part-time position at Chen Software Solutions sustained them, but barely. Some nights, after putting Nathan to bed, Maya would sit on the floor of their room and calculate and recalculate their expenses, trying to squeeze another week's worth of diapers from their dwindling budget. On Nathan's 4-month birthday, Maya received her Stanford degree in the mail. There was no ceremony, no celebration, just a diploma in an envelope and an email congratulating her on completing her studies. That night, she taped the diploma to the wall above her desk and made Nathan a promise. "This is just the beginning," she said, holding him up to see the document. "One day, you'll have one of these too, and no one will ever tell you that you're not enough." Maya's breakthrough came through an unexpected source. The local community center offered a support group for single mothers, and though Maya initially resisted, time was her scarcest resource, her neighbor Lucia insisted she attend. "You need people, Maya," Lucia said firmly. "No one does this alone." At her first meeting, Maya sat quietly in the back, Nathan sleeping against her chest in a sling. She listened to women share stories of struggle, mothers fighting for healthcare access, navigating bureaucratic mazes for assistance, unable to make doctor's appointments because of work constraints. When her turn came to speak, Maya surprised herself. "I'm a programmer," she said. "And listening to everyone, I keep thinking there must be a technological solution to connect people to services they need." That night, Maya stayed up until 3 a.m, sketching out the concept for an app that would connect underserved communities with accessible healthcare services. She mapped user flows, database structures, and potential partnerships while Nathan slept beside her. By the time Nathan was 6 months old, Maya had a rudimentary prototype. She would code during his naps, after her shifts at Chen Software, and in the pre-dawn hours when insomnia struck. The app was simple but functional. It could help users locate nearby clinics with sliding scale fees, check waiting times, and schedule appointments without navigating complex phone systems. But a prototype wasn't enough. Maya needed funding to turn her concept into reality. Using the last of her savings, the final dollars from Jonathan's check, she hired a developer to help polish the interface for 48 crucial hours. "I need it to look professional," she explained to the young programmer she found through a coding forum. "I have one shot at this." Through a contact from the mother's support group, Maya secured a meeting with a small collective of women investors who focused on healthcare innovation. The night before the presentation, she rehearsed in front of her bathroom mirror, Nathan playing on a blanket at her feet. "My app connects marginalized people to accessible healthcare services," she practiced, adjusting her thrift store blazer. "I know it works because I built it for people like me." The morning of the presentation brought disaster. Nathan woke with a fever, the babysitter canceled, and Maya's printer jammed while producing her handouts. With no alternatives, she packed Nathan's diaper bag with extra everything, dressed him in his cleanest onesie, and headed to the meeting with her son on her hip. The 5 women investors waited in a small conference room above a bookstore in Palo Alto. Maya entered, professional folder in one hand, feverish baby in the other, and took a deep breath. "I apologize for bringing my son," she began. "Our childcare fell through and—" "No need to apologize," the oldest investor interrupted, her silver hair framing a kind face. "We're mothers too. Now tell us about your idea." For 20 minutes, Maya presented her concept, occasionally bouncing Nathan when he fussed. She explained the healthcare gaps in underserved communities, demonstrated her prototype, and outlined her vision for expansion. When Nathan began to cry in earnest, the youngest investor simply stood up, took him from Maya's arms, and continued to listen while walking him around the room. As Maya concluded, the lead investor leaned forward. "Why should we invest in you, Maya? This is a competitive field." Maya looked at her son, now sleeping against a stranger's shoulder, and answered from her heart. "Because I don't have the luxury of failure. This isn't a side project I can abandon if it gets difficult. This is our future." The room fell silent. Then, one by one, the women nodded. $150,000, the lead investor said finally. "Enough to develop the full version and run a pilot in one community for 6 months. After that, you'll need to show results." That evening, Maya danced around their tiny room with Nathan in her arms, tears of relief streaming down her face. "We did it," she whispered against his soft hair. "We're really doing this." As she laid him in his crib, Maya didn't know that her impulsive answer, "Because I don't have the luxury of failure," would become the opening line of her best-selling biography a decade later. The words, "Because I don't have the luxury of failure," echoed in Maya's mind as she stared at the white-painted cement wall of her tiny apartment, now adorned with a makeshift whiteboard of sticky notes and diagrams. 3 years had passed since that pivotal meeting with the women investors. Nathan, now a talkative 3-year-old with boundless energy and curiosity, sat cross-legged on the floor of their small living space, methodically assembling a complex puzzle designed for children twice his age. "Mommy, look! I found where this goes," he exclaimed, his small brown fingers confidently placing a piece that Maya herself would have struggled to locate. "That's amazing, sweetie," Maya replied, momentarily shifting her attention from her laptop screen. She smiled at her son, marveling at how his intelligence seemed to blossom daily, far beyond what developmental charts suggested was normal. The $150,000 had transformed Maya's prototype into a functional app that now connected several hundred low-income families to affordable healthcare services in East Palo Alto. The Johnson Health Technologies logo, a simple stylized bridge, adorned the small co-working space she rented in San Jose, where her team of 3 part-time developers worked alongside her. But the money was running out. Maya turned back to her spreadsheet, the numbers refusing to align no matter how she adjusted them. 6 weeks of operating capital remained, perhaps 8 if she stopped taking a salary altogether. The pilot program showed promising results, with wait times at participating clinics reduced by 32%, but investor interest remained tepid at best. "Ms. Johnson?" A voice called from the doorway of her small, glass-walled office. Raj, her lead developer, stood clutching his tablet with an expression Maya had come to dread. The server costs have increased again, and Westside Clinic is asking for customizations to the scheduling module. Maya nodded, keeping her voice steady. Let's prioritize Westside. They're our biggest implementation so far. As for the servers, I'll figure something out. After Raj left, Maya opened her bottom desk drawer and removed the worn leather folder containing her contingency plans. Plan A, the current round of funding, was clearly failing. That left Plan B, personal sacrifice. That evening, after tucking Nathan into his small bed in the corner of their studio apartment, Maya opened her jewelry box. She had precisely 3 items of value: her Harvard class ring, a pair of pearl earrings from her grandmother, and the silver pocket watch that had belonged to her grandfather, her most treasured possession and last tangible connection to her family. "I'm sorry, Grandpa," she whispered, holding the watch to her chest before carefully wrapping it in a soft cloth. The pawn shop on El Camino Real was still open when Maya arrived. The transaction was brief and clinical. The watch, an antique Waltham with a unique engraving, was worth considerably more than Maya had expected. Walking out with enough cash to extend her company's runway for another 2 months, she felt both hollow and determined. Once upon a time, Maya told Nathan during their bedtime ritual the following night, there was a small dragon who wanted to help people in the kingdom. Was the dragon scared? Nathan asked, his bright eyes, with their unmistakable Whitmore blue, wide with curiosity. Sometimes, Maya admitted. But the dragon knew that being scared wasn't the same as giving up. The dragon needed courage to grow big and strong. Like you, Mommy? Nathan asked sleepily. Maya swallowed the lump in her throat. Yes, baby, just like me. 2 weeks later, with the pawned watch money carefully budgeted, Maya received an unexpected call on her company line. Is this Maya Johnson? Asked a brisk female voice. This is Dr. Chen from Highland Hospital in Oakland. We implemented your scheduling system as a trial last month. Maya gripped the phone tighter. Yes, Dr. Chen. Is everything working correctly? Working correctly? The doctor laughed. Ms. Johnson, your system has reduced our emergency department wait times by 40% and increased appointment compliance by 28%. Our board wants to know how quickly we can implement this across all departments. Maya's hand trembled as she muted the call to take a deep breath. When she unmuted, her voice was professional despite the adrenaline coursing through her. I'm delighted to hear that, Dr. Chen. I'd be happy to discuss a full implementation. Excellent. And one more thing. I've shared your results with colleagues at Kaiser and UCSF. They're interested in seeing demonstrations. How's your schedule next week? The following morning found Maya racing down the sterile hallways of Highland Hospital, watching with barely contained emotion as nurses and administrators used her app on tablets and phones. Data flowed across screens, patients moved through departments more efficiently, and the chaotic emergency waiting room of 3 months ago now operated with surprising order. It's quite remarkable, observed Dr. Chen as they walked. Most health tech solutions are designed for wealthy hospitals with sophisticated infrastructure. Yours works in our resource-constrained environment because you actually understood our problems. As they rounded a corner, Dr. Chen stopped abruptly. There's someone I'd like you to meet. Victor Stein from Horizon Ventures is visiting today. He specializes in healthcare innovation investments. Maya froze, mentally cataloging her appearance. She wore her one professional outfit, a navy blue pantsuit purchased from a consignment store, now slightly too large after months of skipping meals to stretch their budget. Her hair was neatly braided, but she wore no makeup, having run out weeks ago. Dr. Chen, I'm not prepared for an investor meeting today, Maya said quietly. The doctor smiled. You don't need PowerPoint slides, Ms. Johnson. You have results. That's what Victor values. Victor Stein proved to be nothing like Maya had imagined. Instead of the slick venture capitalist she expected, she found a rumpled 60-something man with kind eyes and a penetrating gaze drinking coffee in the hospital cafeteria. "So you're the wizard behind this system," he said as Maya sat down. "Tell me how you did what multi-million-dollar healthcare IT companies couldn't." Maya had brought Nathan along, having no childcare options that day. He sat quietly beside her, solving a complex wooden puzzle that one of the nurses had found in the pediatric playroom. "I built it from necessity, not opportunity," Maya explained, periodically glancing at Nathan. "When you're a single mother navigating healthcare with limited resources, you see gaps invisible to most developers. Our system works because it was designed by someone who couldn't afford for it to fail." For 45 minutes, Maya outlined her vision while Nathan quietly occupied himself. She explained how her technology could scale to serve marginalized communities nationwide, potentially transforming healthcare access for millions. Victor asked pointed questions, occasionally watching Nathan with curious eyes. When the boy effortlessly completed the puzzle designed for much older children, Victor's eyebrows rose slightly. "Remarkable son you have there," he noted during a pause in their conversation. "Thank you," Maya replied simply. "He's my greatest motivation." As their meeting concluded, Victor leaned back in his chair. "One last question, Maya. Why you? What makes you believe you can revolutionize healthcare when industry giants have failed?" Maya glanced at Nathan, then back to Victor. "Because I built this not as a market opportunity, but as a personal necessity. The problems we're solving aren't theoretical to me. They were my reality." Victor nodded slowly, then reached for a napkin. He wrote a number on it and slid it across the table. "Is this sufficient to begin in earnest?" Maya stared at the figure. $2 million. "Yes," she managed, her voice steady despite the thundering of her heart. That would be enough to start for real. That night, after Nathan had fallen asleep, Maya stepped onto her tiny balcony and called the one person who had believed in her from the beginning. "Professor Rivera? It's Maya. We got the Series A funding. $2 million. Eleanor Rivera's warm voice filled the line. "I never doubted you would, Maya. Not for a moment." As Maya celebrated quietly with cheap ice cream in her apartment, across the country in Boston, Jonathan Whitmore was accepting the position of CEO of his family's company, unaware that the seed of an empire that would one day eclipse his own was being planted by the woman he had discarded. Maya's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her cream silk blouse, purchased from Neiman Marcus, not a thrift store, before pushing open the glass doors emblazoned with the Johnson Health Technologies logo. 5 years had transformed her company from a desperate gamble into a thriving enterprise valued at $350 million. "Good morning, Ms. Johnson," called the receptionist from behind a sleek desk in the airy lobby of their San Francisco headquarters. The space, with its living walls of greenery and expansive views of the bay, bore no resemblance to the cramped co-working space where Maya had pawned her grandfather's watch to keep the lights on. "The board members are already in the Horizon Room," the receptionist added, "and Mr. Stein called to say he's running 5 minutes late." Maya nodded, straightening her shoulders as she walked toward the conference room. At 30 years old, she carried herself with the quiet confidence of someone who had built something substantial from nothing. Her tailored pantsuit, a far cry from the consignment store clothes of her early days, complemented her natural beauty, which had only matured with time and purpose. Inside the Horizon Room, 7 men in expensive suits turned as she entered. Maya was acutely aware, as always, that she was both the only woman and the only person of color in the room. Yet it was also her company, her vision, her success. "Gentlemen, shall we begin?" Maya took her position at the head of the table without hesitation, opening her leather portfolio with practiced ease. Our Q3 results exceeded projections by 17%. As Maya led the meeting, presenting growth figures and expansion plans with authoritative precision, she occasionally caught her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows. The contrast between this moment and where she'd started was sometimes still jarring. from the pregnant student abandoned in Boston to the CEO commanding respect in a San Francisco boardroom. Later that afternoon, Maya left the office early to attend Nathan's science exhibition at his specialized school for gifted children. At 8 years old, Nathan Johnson was already recognized as exceptional even among other gifted students. His teachers struggled to provide sufficient challenges for his accelerating intellect, particularly in mathematics and computational thinking. Maya slipped quietly into the back of the auditorium, watching as Nathan confidently explained his project to a panel of impressed judges. He had developed a basic algorithm to identify patterns in cancer cell images, building on research papers he'd devoured over summer break. The neural network can identify certain cell abnormalities with 86% accuracy, Nathan explained, his voice clear and articulate beyond his years. With more training data, I believe we could improve that to match or exceed pathologist accuracy for preliminary screenings. Pride swelled in Maya's chest as she observed her son. He had her warm brown skin and curly hair, but those striking blue eyes, Jonathan's eyes, gazed out with an intelligence and determination that was entirely his own. Sometimes when she looked at him, Maya saw flashes of what might have been if Jonathan had chosen differently. But those thoughts grew rarer with each passing year. "Your son is remarkable," whispered the mother seated beside Maya. "Is he really only 8? Maya nodded, smiling. "He is. You must be very proud." "Every day," Maya replied simply. The following week brought another kind of challenge. Maya sat across from Harold Brixton, CEO of Pharmatech Global, one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. His silver hair and custom-tailored suit projected old-money confidence, and his tone carried the slight condescension Maya had grown accustomed to in such meetings. "While your platform shows promise, Ms. Johnson," Brixton said, examining her proposal with studied casualness, "perhaps you don't fully comprehend the complexity of the healthcare market. These communities you're targeting have limited purchasing power." Maya maintained her composure, though the familiar heat of indignation rose in her chest. "That's precisely where you're mistaken, Mr. Brixton. These limited purchasing power communities represent billions in healthcare spending. It's just inefficiently distributed through emergency services rather than preventative care." She leaned forward slightly. "But perhaps you don't comprehend what it's like to build something from zero without safety nets or family connections. My technology works because it was designed by someone who understood the problem intimately, not theoretically." The acquisition offer of $100 million came 3 days later. Maya rejected it without hesitation, despite her board's initial excitement. "This company isn't just an asset to sell," she explained during the emergency board meeting. "It's a mission with the potential to transform healthcare access globally." Victor Stein, her first major investor and now a trusted advisor, smiled knowingly across the table. "I told you she wouldn't take it," he said to the others. "Maya isn't building for an exit strategy. She's building for impact." That evening, Maya had a video call scheduled with Professor Rivera, who had remained a mentor and confidant throughout the years. "The hospital implementation in Detroit exceeded all expectations," Maya reported, settling onto her couch with a rare glass of wine. Behind her, the lights of San Francisco twinkled through the windows of her downtown apartment, purchased last year after Johnson Health's valuation crossed $200 million. "Maya, you're transforming lives," Eleanor Rivera said, her face creased with pride. "I knew you would, but the scale of what you've accomplished in just 5 years is extraordinary." 2 weeks later, Maya found herself in an unexpected position, being photographed for Forbes magazine. The article, "From Adversity to Success: How Maya Johnson is Revolutionizing Accessible Healthcare," would feature her as one of the rising stars in health technology. "Could we get a few shots with your son?" asked the photographer, adjusting his equipment in Maya's office. Maya hesitated before agreeing. Nathan arrived from school, immediately commanding the room with his precocious intelligence and natural poise. For the cover shot, they stood together, Maya in a professional dress, Nathan in his school uniform, both with identical expressions of serious determination. "You look like partners plotting world domination," joked the journalist as the camera clicked. "Healthcare transformation," Maya corrected with a smile, though Nathan might have broader ambitions. The Forbes feature generated considerable attention, bringing both opportunities and complications. 3 more acquisition offers arrived within a month, each larger than the last. The final one, $300 million from a major health insurance conglomerate, was presented as an offer you can't reasonably decline. Maya's response was characteristically direct. "Watch me." The day she closed on her first house, a modern 4-bedroom in Palo Alto with a custom laboratory space for Nathan, felt like crossing an invisible threshold. After the realtor handed over the keys and left, Maya stood alone in the empty living room, sunlight streaming through the windows onto hardwood floors that were actually hers. That evening, a small gathering of close friends celebrated with Maya and Nathan, Victor Stein, Dr. Chen from Highland Hospital, Raj, who had been with the company since its earliest days, and a few others who had believed in them from the beginning. As the adults chatted over wine and the catered dinner, Nathan approached his mother with an expression she recognized, his thoughtful, analytical look when processing something complex. "Mom," he said quietly, "why do we never talk about my father?" The question, though not entirely unexpected, still caught Maya off guard. The room seemed to quiet around them, though she knew it was just her perception shifting. "That's a complicated story," Maya replied carefully. "Why do you ask now?" Nathan's blue eyes, so unnervingly like Jonathan's, met hers directly. "The Forbes article mentioned you were a single mother who overcame adversity. I've never asked because you seemed reluctant. But I'm old enough now, aren't I?" Maya led Nathan to the window seat overlooking their new backyard. "Yes, you are," she acknowledged. "Your father was a student at Harvard when I knew him. He wasn't ready to be a father. He chose his career and social status instead of us." "Does he know about me?" Nathan asked, his voice steady but vulnerable. "Has he ever asked?" "No, sweetheart," Maya answered honestly. "He made it very clear he didn't want to be part of our lives." Nathan was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the same methodical approach he applied to scientific problems. "Then we built all this without him," he finally said. "We're a good team, aren't we?" Maya hugged him tightly, feeling his small but strong arms wrap around her in return. "The best team possible." That night, after the guests had gone and Nathan was asleep, Maya unpacked a small box containing mementos from her past. Among them was the printed email she had sent to Jonathan 8 years earlier. The paper was creased and yellowing, but the words remained clear. "One day I will return, not as the girl you discarded, but as the woman you never imagined I could become." She traced the words with her finger, unaware that she would soon have the opportunity to fulfill that promise. Across the country, Jonathan Whitmore was being named CEO of the family company, with no idea that the empire he was inheriting was already being eclipsed by the woman he had once deemed not enough. The email from MIT landed in Maya's inbox with a subject line so extraordinary that she had to read it 3 times. "Early admission offer for Nathan Johnson. Full scholarship." Her fingers trembled as she called out to her son, who was working in his home laboratory down the hall. "Nathan, could you come here for a moment?" At 14, Nathan Johnson had grown into a lanky teenager with his mother's warm brown skin and thoughtful demeanor, but those piercing blue eyes, unmistakably Whitmore, reflected a brilliance that had now captured the attention of the world's premier technology institute. He appeared in her office doorway, lab goggles pushed up into his curly hair, a small smudge of something on his cheek. "What's up, Mom?" Maya turned her screen toward him. "This just arrived." Nathan scanned the email, his expression shifting from curiosity to disbelief. "MIT? But I'm only 14. This says admission at 15. His voice trailed off as he continued reading. "They're offering you early admission with a full scholarship. Maya said softly. They were apparently very impressed by your cardiac diagnostic algorithm. 3 months earlier, Nathan had developed a sophisticated algorithm for detecting subtle patterns in heart rhythms that often eluded human cardiologists. The project, which began as an extension of a science fair entry, had earned him the National Young Scientists Award and evidently the attention of MIT's admissions committee. "This is incredible," Nathan whispered, still processing the information. "But MIT is in Boston." The word hung between them, charged with unspoken history. Boston, the city Maya had fled 15 years ago, pregnant and heartbroken. The city she had deliberately avoided even as her company grew to international prominence, choosing instead to expand to Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles. Later that evening, Maya sat in her office at home, staring at maps of Boston on her tablet. The familiar streets and landmarks brought back a flood of memories, some beautiful, some unbearably painful. She traced the route from MIT to Harvard with her finger, remembering the walks she used to take along the Charles River before Jonathan had revealed his true nature. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Victor Stein, in town for their quarterly strategy meeting, stood in her doorway. "Raj told me about Nathan's MIT offer," he said, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Congratulations. It's extraordinary." "Thank you," Maya replied, setting the tablet aside. "It's just Boston," Victor finished for her. "You knew this day would come eventually, Maya. The boy is brilliant, and Boston is home to the best technical universities in the country." Maya sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I've spent 15 years building this life for us, Victor, a life completely separate from Boston and everything it represents." "And you've succeeded beyond anyone's wildest expectations," Victor noted. "Johnson Health is valued at nearly $3 billion. You've transformed healthcare access for millions. Perhaps it's time to face the past from a position of strength." The conversation with Victor lingered in Maya's mind as she continued her evening routine. After reviewing quarterly projections for their newest AI diagnostic tool, she checked on Nathan, who was engrossed in research articles on his tablet in the living room. "What are you reading?" she asked, settling beside him on the couch. "Articles about MIT and Harvard," he replied without looking up. "Mom, why have we never gone back to Boston? You studied there, right? Wouldn't you want to visit your old campus?" The question, innocent yet penetrating, made Maya's heart constrict. "It's complicated, Nathan." "That's what you always say when it involves my father," he observed, finally meeting her gaze with those searching blue eyes. "Is that why we've never gone back? Because he's there?" Maya realized the moment had come, the conversation she had rehearsed countless times over the years. "Let's talk about this properly," she said, closing her laptop and giving him her full attention. They moved to the window seat overlooking San Francisco Bay, their special spot for important conversations since Nathan was small. The city lights twinkled below, a constellation of human ambition and perseverance that mirrored Maya's own journey. "Your father," Maya began carefully, "was a student at Harvard when we met, from a very wealthy, established Boston family." "The Whitmore family," Nathan said quietly. "I researched Harvard's major donors last year. I saw the Whitmore Computer Science building. I wondered if there was a connection." Maya nodded, unsurprised by her son's detective work. "Yes, Jonathan Whitmore. When I told him I was pregnant with you, he made it very clear that I didn't fit into his world or his future plans." "He rejected us," Nathan stated simply, processing the information. "He offered me money to solve the problem," Maya continued, the memory still bitter after 15 years. "When I refused to terminate the pregnancy, he told me I would never be enough for someone like him, that I was just a charity project." Nathan's expression darkened. "Because you were on scholarship? Because you're black?" "All of that," Maya acknowledged. "He was from old Boston money, concerned with lineage and social standing. I was a scholarship student from Roxbury with no connections." "Did he ever try to find out about me?" Nathan asked, his voice steady but vulnerable. "Did he ever wonder what happened to us?" Maya shook her head. "No, sweetheart. He made it very clear that he didn't want to be part of our lives. He used his family's influence to make Boston impossible for me. I lost my scholarship, my internship, everything." Nathan was quiet for a long moment, absorbing this information with the methodical thoughtfulness that characterized his approach to complex problems. "So we built everything without him," he finally said. "Just us." "Just us," Maya confirmed, squeezing his hand. "And now MIT wants me," Nathan continued, a new resolve forming in his expression. "In Boston, where he is." "You don't have to go there," Maya said quickly. "Stanford would accept you in a heartbeat. So would Caltech or—" "MIT has the best bioengineering program in the world," Nathan interrupted gently. "And their computational biology lab is doing exactly the kind of research I'm interested in." Maya studied her son's face, the determination in his eyes, the set of his jaw. At 14, he already possessed a clarity of purpose that many adults never achieved. "We've never made decisions based on fear," Nathan reminded her, using one of her own frequent sayings against her. "Why start now?" The next morning, Maya's decision crystallized as she opened her email to find an invitation that seemed almost predestined. To Maya Johnson, CEO, from Massachusetts Chamber of Commerce. Subject: Keynote Speaker Invitation, Annual Business Innovation Conference. Dear Ms. Johnson, on behalf of the Massachusetts Chamber of Commerce, we would be honored to have you deliver the keynote address at our annual Business Innovation Conference this October in Boston. Your remarkable journey from Harvard student to healthcare technology pioneer embodies the spirit of innovation we wish to celebrate. Maya stared at the email, noting the conference details. The event would be held at the Copley Plaza Hotel and was sponsored by several major Boston institutions, including the Chamber of Commerce, where Carlton Whitmore, Jonathan's father, had once served as president. Later that day, after confirming Nathan's interest in visiting MIT, Maya made her decision. She called Nathan into her office and found him already dressed in the Johnson Health Technologies t-shirt he often wore when helping with the company's community outreach programs. "Nathan, I think it's time we visited Boston together," she said, turning her screen to show him the invitation. "I've been asked to deliver the keynote at a major business conference there in October. We could tour MIT while we're there." Nathan's face lit up. "Really? You're okay with going back?" Maya nodded, feeling a weight lifting from her shoulders. "It's time. Boston is part of both our histories, and now it might be part of your future." As Nathan hugged her, Maya glanced at the framed Forbes cover on her wall, mother and son standing shoulder to shoulder, their expressions reflecting identical determination. The caption read, "Healthcare Revolutionary Maya Johnson, Building a Billion-Dollar Legacy." That evening, as Maya prepared the outline for her Boston presentation, she had no idea that the Boston Globe was already researching an article on the decline of the Whitmore Empire, nor that Jonathan would see her name on the conference program and spill coffee all over his $3,000 suit. As Maya finalized the outline for her Boston presentation, a strange mix of emotions washed over her. The city she had once fled in desperation would now welcome her as a conquering hero. 15 years had transformed the pregnant, abandoned student into one of the most influential women in healthcare technology. She closed her laptop and gazed out at the San Francisco skyline, mentally preparing herself for the journey back to the place where her life had shattered and unwittingly set her on the path to extraordinary success. "Are you sure about this, Mom?" Nathan asked the next morning as he watched her book their flights. "We don't have to go if it's too difficult." Maya looked up at her son, so perceptive at 14. "I'm sure. Some ghosts need confronting, and Boston is full of good memories too. It's where I learned to code, where I discovered my passion for accessible technology." She smiled softly. "It's also where you began, even if the circumstances weren't what I'd planned." 3 weeks later, Their plane descended through clouds into Boston Logan International Airport. Maya gripped the armrest, taking a deep breath as the familiar skyline came into view: the Prudential Tower, the Hancock Building, the gentle curve of the Charles River. "It's beautiful," Nathan remarked, peering past her through the window. "Yes," Maya admitted. "It always was." As their car approached the Copley Plaza Hotel, Maya felt a surreal disconnect between her memories and present reality. The last time she'd seen this building, she had been walking past it in the rain, unable to afford even a cup of coffee in its lobby. Now she was arriving as the keynote speaker for a major business conference, staying in one of its luxury suites. The doorman rushed forward as they exited the vehicle. "Welcome to the Copley Plaza, Ms. Johnson. It's an honor to have you with us." Maya nodded, remembering how invisible she had been to men in the same uniform 15 years ago. "Thank you," she replied simply, ushering Nathan forward. Their suite was opulent, all polished wood, rich fabrics, and spectacular views of Copley Square. Nathan immediately explored every corner while Maya stood by the window, looking out at the city that had once rejected her. "The last time I was here," she murmured, "I could barely afford a coffee." Nathan joined her at the window. "And now they're paying you to speak." Maya smiled, placing an arm around her son's shoulders. Life takes unexpected turns. Later that afternoon, they took a taxi to Cambridge. As they walked through Harvard Yard, Maya pointed out buildings and shared carefully edited stories of her time there. She showed Nathan the computer science building, ironically funded by the Whitmore family, where she had spent countless hours learning the skills that would later make her fortune. "This is where I took advanced algorithms with Professor Rivera," she explained as they passed a stately brick building. "She believed in me when no one else did." Nathan absorbed everything with keen interest. "Did you and my father meet in class?" Maya hesitated, choosing her words carefully. "We met in Widener Library. I was debugging some code, and he came over to introduce himself." "What was he studying?" Nathan asked, his curiosity evident. "Business and economics," Maya replied. "He was preparing to join his family's real estate company." She deliberately changed the subject. "Tomorrow we're touring MIT. I think you'll love the Media Lab and the Computational Biology department." As they continued their tour, Maya felt herself relaxing slightly. She was reclaiming these spaces, walking now as a successful entrepreneur rather than a devastated young woman. Harvard Yard no longer belonged to her painful past. It could also be part of her son's promising future. Meanwhile, across the river in downtown Boston, Jonathan Whitmore sat in his corner office at Whitmore Properties, reviewing disappointing quarterly reports. At 40, Jonathan still maintained the polished appearance expected of a Boston elite, though fine lines around his eyes and a perpetual furrow between his brows hinted at recent stresses. "The tech sector is outperforming real estate again," he muttered, flipping through the financial analysis. The Whitmore Properties portfolio, once the crown jewel of Boston real estate, had been steadily losing ground to technology companies that seemed to mint new millionaires daily. His assistant knocked lightly on the door. "Mr. Whitmore? I brought the program for the Business Innovation Conference. I thought you might want to review the speakers since you'll be representing us at the gala dinner." Jonathan barely glanced up. "Just leave it on my desk, Sarah." Minutes later, as he absently flipped through the glossy program, his eyes caught on a name and photo that made his blood run cold. Maya Johnson, CEO of Johnson Health Technologies, featured prominently as the keynote speaker. "This can't be right," he whispered, studying the professional headshot of a striking woman with confident eyes and an assured smile. Could this possibly be the same Maya he had cruelly discarded 15 years ago? His fingers flew across his keyboard, pulling up search results for Maya Johnson CEO. Article after article appeared, painting the portrait of a healthcare technology pioneer whose company was now valued at nearly $3 billion. The Forbes cover featuring her and a teenage boy made Jonathan's coffee cup slip from his fingers, spilling dark liquid across his expensive desk blotter. "Sarah," he called urgently, "get me everything you can find on Maya Johnson and Johnson Health Technologies. Everything." Throughout the afternoon, Jonathan pored over articles detailing Maya's remarkable rise from humble beginnings to healthcare innovator. None mentioned him or their past relationship, but the timeline was unmistakable. The boy in the photos, her son, according to the articles, would be around 14 now. The age matched perfectly. That evening, Jonathan sat at the hotel bar of the Copley Plaza, nursing a scotch and checking his watch repeatedly. He had come on the pretense of reviewing the conference venue, but his real purpose was far more personal. Would she recognize him? What would she say after all these years? His questions were answered when the hotel's main doors swung open and Maya Johnson entered the lobby, her teenage son beside her. Jonathan froze, his drink halfway to his lips. Maya moved with graceful confidence, dressed in an impeccably tailored burgundy suit that spoke of wealth worn comfortably. The frightened young woman he had dismissed so cruelly was nowhere to be seen in this poised, powerful executive. But it was the boy who truly captured Jonathan's attention. Tall for his age, with Maya's warm brown skin and curly hair, the teenager carried himself with the same easy confidence as his mother. But when he turned to ask her a question, Jonathan saw his own eyes staring back from across the lobby, the distinctive Whitmore blue that had marked his family for generations. "My God," Jonathan whispered, his glass slipping from his hand and shattering on the bar top. The crash drew momentary attention from across the lobby. Maya's gaze swept over and momentarily locked with Jonathan's. For one electric second, recognition flashed between them, a current of shared history that neither had anticipated encountering so suddenly. Maya's expression revealed nothing as she smoothly guided her son toward the elevators, her hand protective on his shoulder. Jonathan remained frozen at the bar, his heart pounding as though he'd run a marathon. "Sir, are you all right?" the bartender asked, already cleaning up the spilled drink. "Fine," Jonathan managed, though he was anything but, just clumsy. In her suite, Maya leaned against the closed door, her composed facade finally cracking. "Mom? What's wrong?" Nathan asked, concern evident in his voice, in those Whitmore blue eyes that had just unknowingly connected with their source. "Nothing," Maya assured him, straightening up and forcing a smile. "Just tired from traveling." Later that night, Maya stood at her hotel window, looking out at the city lights. Seeing Jonathan had been inevitable, she supposed, but the reality of it had still struck her like a physical blow. The years had changed him, lines on his face, a certain weariness in his posture that the younger Jonathan would never have allowed. "I'm not that girl anymore," she whispered to her reflection, "and you don't have the power to hurt me now." Across the hotel, Jonathan sat in darkness in his own room, a fresh drink untouched before him, wrestling with the implications of what he had seen. The woman he had discarded had become more successful than he could have imagined, and the child he had rejected, the child he had never even known existed, walked the world with his eyes. As Maya guided Nathan toward the elevators, feeling the weight of Jonathan's gaze on her back, she had no idea that in less than 24 hours, all of Boston would be witnessing the confrontation that would define the legacy of them both. The morning of the conference dawned bright and clear over Boston, sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Maya's suite at the Copley Plaza. She stood before the mirror, adjusting the lapel of her custom Armani suit, a deep navy that complemented her complexion perfectly. The woman reflected back at her bore little resemblance to the frightened student who had once fled this city with nothing but a suitcase and a broken heart. "You look amazing, Mom," Nathan said, watching her from the doorway. He was dressed in a tailored blazer and slacks, his curly hair neatly styled, looking older than his 14 years. "Thank you, sweetheart." Maya smiled, turning to face him. "Are you ready for this? There will be a lot of people watching." Nathan nodded confidently. "I'm used to being Maya Johnson's son at events. Besides, I want to see you knock their socks off." They took the elevator down to the grand ballroom where the conference was being held. The space had been transformed into a sea of round tables, each adorned with fresh flowers and program booklets. A massive screen behind the stage displayed the conference logo alongside the words, "Keynote Speaker, Maya Johnson, CEO, Johnson Health Technologies." "Ms. Johnson, welcome." The conference organizer rushed forward, hand extended. "We're absolutely thrilled to have you. The governor just arrived and specifically asked to meet you before your speech." Maya smiled graciously. "I'd be delighted." As they made their way through the growing crowd, Maya felt eyes following her, admiring glances, curious stares, and occasionally shocked double-takes from people who recognized her from her Harvard days. She guided Nathan through introductions to tech executives, venture capitalists, and politicians, her poised demeanor never faltering. In the back of the room, Jonathan Whitmore slipped in quietly, choosing a seat where he could observe without being immediately noticed. He had barely slept, his mind racing with implications and possibilities. The Maya he remembered had been intelligent, but unpolished. The woman commanding the room now moved with the easy confidence of someone who belonged in the highest echelons of power. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats," the organizer announced. "We're honored to begin our conference with a true pioneer in healthcare technology." The room fell silent as the lights dimmed. A video introduction played on the massive screen, highlighting Johnson Health Technologies' global impact. Rural clinics in developing countries using their diagnostic tools, urban hospitals reducing wait times with their AI systems, children receiving life-saving treatments identified through their algorithms. "Our next speaker has revolutionized healthcare access globally," the moderator announced as the video concluded. "With more than 300 million users in 47 countries, her technology has reduced infant mortality by 23% in regions where it operates. Please welcome Maya Johnson, CEO of Johnson Health Technologies." The applause was thunderous as Maya took the stage, the spotlight illuminating her confident smile. Jonathan remained frozen in his seat, watching the woman he had once cruelly dismissed command the attention of every person in the room. "Innovation often springs from necessity," Maya began, her voice clear and measured. 15 years ago, I was a Harvard student without resources, determined to prove that quality technology could reach those who had been rendered invisible by our healthcare system." As she continued her presentation, outlining how her company had transformed access to medical care in underserved communities, Jonathan couldn't tear his eyes away. Each achievement she described felt like a personal rebuke to his past cruelty. But it was the teenage boy in the front row that truly captivated his attention. The same caramel skin tone as Maya, but with unmistakable Whitmore eyes. The mathematical certainty of the timeline was devastating. When Maya concluded to a standing ovation, Jonathan remained seated, his mind racing. The governor approached the stage to shake her hand, followed by CEOs and investors eager to speak with her. She was untouchable now, surrounded by admirers, far from the vulnerable young woman he had so easily discarded. During the cocktail reception that followed, Jonathan finally gathered the courage to approach her. His palms were slick with nervous sweat, his heart pounding uncomfortably against his ribs. "Maya?" he said, his voice cracking slightly as he reached her. "Is it really you? I could hardly believe it when I saw your name." Maya turned slowly, her expression perfectly composed, almost clinical in its detachment. "Jonathan Whitmore, what a surprise to see you here. I thought the Whitmores only attended events for profitable companies." The barb landed precisely. Recent headlines about Whitmore Properties losing major contracts to tech-focused competitors were common knowledge in Boston business circles. "You look incredible," Jonathan stammered, his practiced social grace deserting him. "Your company is worth $2.8 billion, according to the latest valuation," Maya completed calmly. "Significantly more than Whitmore Properties' current $580 million, if I'm not mistaken." Jonathan swallowed hard, unused to being on the defensive end of a conversation. Before he could formulate a response, Nathan appeared at Maya's side. "Mom, the MIT director wants to speak with you about the research partnership," he said, then noticed Jonathan. "Oh, sorry for interrupting." "Not at all," Maya replied smoothly. "Nathan, this is an old acquaintance from Harvard. Jonathan, this is my son, Nathan Johnson, recently accepted to MIT with a full scholarship at 15. Jonathan stared at the boy, at those eyes, feeling as though the ground beneath him had disappeared. He extended a hand automatically. "Pleased to meet you, Nathan." "The pleasure is mine, sir," the teenager replied politely, shaking his hand with a firm grip that matched his direct gaze. "MIT at 15? Jonathan managed. "That's extraordinary." "Nathan is extraordinary," Maya agreed, her voice warm with pride. "Raised by a single mother working 18 hours a day, without any paternal contribution or interest." The tension between them was palpable, charged with 15 years of unspoken history. Jonathan opened his mouth to respond when they were mercifully interrupted. "Maya, we need to steal you away," announced the CEO of Massachusetts General Hospital. "The governor is eager to discuss implementing your system across all state public hospitals." "Excuse me, Jonathan," Maya said with a small, triumphant smile. "Some of us have business to conduct." Jonathan remained rooted to the spot as Maya walked away, immediately surrounded by CEOs and politicians eager for her attention. His assistant approached cautiously. "Sir, are you all right? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I have," Jonathan murmured. "The ghost of the biggest mistake of my life." Throughout the afternoon, Jonathan watched from a distance as Maya navigated the conference with effortless grace. Each time he saw Nathan, brilliant, poised, confident Nathan with those unmistakable Whitmore eyes, a fresh wave of regret washed over him. By the time the gala dinner began that evening, Jonathan had consumed several whiskeys, seeking liquid courage for what he knew he needed to do. Maya was seated at the head table with the governor and conference organizers, while Jonathan found himself at a secondary table with other real estate executives. When the dessert course arrived, Jonathan abandoned all caution and approached Maya's table, his movements slightly unsteady. "I need to speak with you," he said too loudly. Several nearby conversations paused. Maya looked up, her expression carefully neutral. "This isn't the time, Jonathan." "I didn't know," he continued, his voice rising. "I never knew about the boy. Why didn't you tell me?" A hush fell over the surrounding tables. Maya slowly placed her napkin beside her plate and stood, facing him directly. "You told me I wasn't enough, remember?" she said, her voice carrying in the sudden silence. "That I should solve the problem or disappear." The blood drained from Jonathan's face as he realized they had an audience. Among the observers were 3 Whitmore Properties board members and his fiancée, Catherine Lowell, daughter of Senator Lowell, all seated at a nearby table. "Maya, can we talk privately?" "Please," he pleaded, suddenly aware of how public this confrontation had become. "We have nothing to discuss," she replied evenly. "Your $10,000 check was the best investment I ever made. I built an empire you couldn't manage even in your best days." Nathan approached, confusion evident on his face. "Mom? Is everything okay?" Maya smiled reassuringly at her son. "Perfectly fine. Mr. Whitmore and I were just concluding a conversation that began 15 years ago." Jonathan couldn't tear his eyes from the teenager's face, from those eyes that mirrored his own. "You have my eyes," he said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Nathan looked between his mother and this stranger, comprehension dawning slowly. You're my biological father?" While a shocked silence fell across the gala, Maya felt a strange sense of relief. The secret that had lived in her heart for 15 years was finally in the open, and she found herself standing not as a victim, but as a victor. You're my biological father?" Nathan's words hung in the air. crystal clear in the sudden silence that had fallen over the gala dinner. Maya watched as every head turned toward their table, the collective intake of breath almost audible as Boston's elite realized they were witnessing a scandal unfolding in real time. Jonathan stood frozen, his face ashen as he stared at Nathan. Yes, I believe I am. Within 24 hours, the moment had transformed from a private revelation to public spectacle. The Boston Globe's headline blared across both digital and print editions: Whitmore heir abandoned ex-girlfriend who became billionaire. The story spread like wildfire, first across Boston, then nationally. The irresistible narrative of the privileged man who discarded a pregnant girlfriend only to have her rise to heights that eclipsed his family's legacy. Maya woke to her phone buzzing incessantly with notifications. News outlets, talk shows, and social media platforms were all dissecting the confrontation. She set the phone aside and gazed out at the Boston skyline, feeling strangely empty. The vindication she had occasionally imagined over the years felt hollow now that it had arrived. In his hotel suite across town, Jonathan faced his own reckoning. Catherine Lowell stood before him, her elegant features rigid with anger, his grandmother's emerald engagement ring clutched in her palm. "How could you not tell me about this?" she demanded. "I had to hear about your abandoned child from the breakfast news." "Catherine, please, I didn't know about the boy," Jonathan pleaded, reaching for her hand. She stepped back, placing the ring deliberately on the coffee table between them. "Even if that's true, which I'm not convinced it is, you offered money to solve the problem. You threw out a pregnant woman because she wasn't good enough for your precious family name." Her voice trembled with disgust. "My father is running for re-election, Jonathan. I can't be associated with this kind of scandal." By mid-morning, Jonathan received another blow, an emergency message from the Whitmore Properties Board requesting his immediate presence. The boardroom, with its mahogany table and portraits of Whitmore patriarchs, had always been a sanctuary of power for his family. Today, it felt like a tribunal. "The board has concerns about the recent revelations," Harold Beaumont, the longest-serving member, began carefully. "The timing is particularly unfortunate given our current financial challenges." "This is a personal matter," Jonathan protested weakly. "Not when it dominates every business news outlet in the country," replied Victoria Chen, the newest board member. "Not when our competitors are already using it against us in negotiations. The contrast between your treatment of Ms. Johnson and her subsequent success is problematic for our brand." By the time Jonathan left the building, his letter of resignation had been unanimously accepted by the board. A restructuring would be announced to the press, with his cousin stepping in as interim CEO. Meanwhile, in her hotel suite, Maya found Nathan sitting in the window alcove, staring out at Cambridge visible across the river. His shoulders carried a tension she hadn't seen before. "You should have told me who he was," he said without turning around. Maya sat beside him, giving him space while remaining close. "I was trying to protect you from the pain I felt, and perhaps to protect my own heart, too. He wants to meet me. Sent a message to my phone." Nathan finally looked at her, his eyes, so like Jonathan's, filled with confusion. "Should I see him?" Maya took a deep breath. "That's your decision. You're old enough to make this choice for yourself." The next day, Jonathan arrived at the Four Seasons restaurant 15 minutes early, his hands trembling slightly as he ordered a water. He had spent the morning reading everything he could find about Nathan, his academic achievements, his algorithm for cardiac diagnosis, his early acceptance to MIT. Pride and regret battled within him as he realized what he had missed, what he had thrown away with such casual cruelty. When Nathan walked in alone, Jonathan felt simultaneously relieved and disappointed. Part of him had hoped Maya would come too, giving him a chance to apologize properly. "Thank you for meeting me," Jonathan said as Nathan sat down across from him. The teenager studied him with an analytical gaze that reminded Jonathan uncomfortably of board members evaluating a failing proposal. I have questions, Nathan said simply. For the next hour, Nathan led a conversation that was by turns awkward, painful, and illuminating. He asked pointed questions about Jonathan's relationship with Maya, about his reaction to the pregnancy, about his family's influence in Boston. Why did you abandon her? The direct question hung between them, unavoidable. Jonathan stared into his untouched coffee. I was a different person then, young, arrogant, worried about what my family would think. I made the biggest mistake of my life. Do you know she cried every night during my first year? That she worked 3 jobs and still read to me before bed? Do you know how many times she collapsed from exhaustion while building her company? Jonathan couldn't meet his son's gaze, each question landing like a physical blow. I'm not here to meet my father, Nathan continued, his voice steady beyond his years. I'm here to understand the man who looked at my mother, the most extraordinary woman who ever existed, and saw no value in her. The following day, Jonathan's resignation letter was officially accepted by the Whitmore Properties Board. The company announced its comprehensive restructuring, while Johnson Health Technologies confirmed plans to open a new research center in Boston, creating 500 jobs. 1 week after the fateful gala, Jonathan waited in the lobby of the gleaming Johnson Health Technologies temporary offices in downtown Boston. Maya had agreed to see him for exactly 5 minutes. Mr. Whitmore, her assistant announced coolly, Ms. Johnson will see you now. Maya's office was minimalist and elegant, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. She remained seated as he entered, a subtle power move that wasn't lost on him. I've come to ask for forgiveness, Jonathan began, standing awkwardly before her desk, and to offer anything, retroactive child support, a portion of my inheritance for Nathan. Nathan has a $10 million college fund and will be a billionaire before he turns 30, Maya interrupted, her voice businesslike. We don't need your money. Then what? How can I make amends for what I did? Maya regarded him with an expression devoid of anger, containing only a distant curiosity. That's what you still don't understand, Jonathan. There is no making amends. I'm not looking for justice or revenge. The girl you destroyed doesn't exist anymore. What Nathan said, about you crying every night. It's in the past. Maya rose, indicating the meeting was ending. You were a chapter in my life, not the entire story. What I built despite you, not because of you. In the elevator, Jonathan made one last desperate attempt. Did you ever think about me during all these years? Maya offered a gentle smile. Honestly, for years, yes, then less and less. And for the past 5 years? Not once. You said I would never be enough for your world, Jonathan. You were right, because I built a much larger one. As the elevator doors closed, Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. On the other side, Jonathan stared at his distorted reflection in the polished metal, finally comprehending the magnitude of what he had lost. Not just a family, but the chance to be part of something truly extraordinary. That evening, in their penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental, Maya and Nathan watched Boston's lights twinkle below them. He wants to be part of my life, Nathan commented, breaking the comfortable silence. And what do you want? Maya asked. I have everything I need, he answered, resting his head on his mother's shoulder. I always have. As Boston glittered beneath the night sky, Maya Johnson knew she had come full circle. Not as the rejected girl who had promised vengeance, but as the woman who had overcome abandonment not through retribution, but by realizing her true potential. The ultimate revenge, after all, wasn't destroying Jonathan Whitmore, but building a life so extraordinary that his absence had become irrelevant. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.